Okay, everybody. We got the okay from the technical department, and so we are ready to go. We are in Genesis chapter 41, but since this is Wednesday, we're sort of going to have a Whack Whack Wednesday night. We haven't had one in a long time, and I feel like we need to talk about some of the things that's going on in our world, and then we'll get into chapter 41, I promise. I don't know if you've heard about the discoveries that they have made public about the Grand Pyramid in Giza. These things were discovered a few years ago, so it is odd that they've now made them come to the front or whatever. But there are vast structures underneath the pyramids. Now, Edgar Cayce said that years ago, but Edgar Cayce claimed to be a Christian, but he was talking to familiar spirits. So we don't know when this thing was built. We don't know how it was built. We can't build them today. These structures go down 1.2 miles into the earth, and so there's a lot of speculation about what they are, and I think that's just silly. If you ever watched Men in Black, I watched it one time, but I wasn't paying attention, and I just remember this one scene when he took him to the locker people. I think it was locker 318 or something, and there was a whole universe in this locker, and they thought that was the only thing there was. But that's kind of, I think, how we are when we try to explain away this stuff. We don't know how long this planet's been here. We don't know what has been before us. And so God has written us a book, and most people don't care what it says. But we will not be held accountable for those things that aren't in that book. And so just keep your nose in that book, because if we are living in the last days, which I believe we are, from multiple signs, it is going to be the greatest time of deception in the world. And so one good rule to live by is whatever the social media wants you to believe, don't believe it. And so just be skeptical of everything and everybody. I got my good eye on most of y'all. And but anyway, I do think it's interesting because it's part of our world today. One thing I want to show you before I show you about the pyramids, there are pyramids all over the world. Actually, the greatest pyramids, the biggest pyramids, are in South America. There are pyramids all over the United States, but you don't see them as prominent because they weren't made out of granite. And so most of the time they call them mounds. A lot of Native Americans have different special sacred sites, and they call them mounds. Those were pyramids at one time. And so, for whatever reason, it seems like the devil likes the shape of a pyramid. Now, we can go down this. We've done it before here years ago. But there are tangible, scientific, different things under the shape of a pyramid that can be registered and monitored. Different frequency seems to be different growth cycles. There seems to be some kind of gathering of energy, for lack of a better word, and dispersing underneath a pyramid. Something else that I haven't heard anybody say, they are talking like maybe these pyramids were the old original worldwide internet. And one thing to remember, the top of the Grand Pyramid was truncated. At some time, they came in later without any precision and put the capstone on it. Why is that? There's a lot of different theories, but a lot of these things are very interesting. So I feel like the church is where you need to come to kind of get your bearings. So the first thing I want you to know is don't believe anything you see or hear, and especially now. They can make computer-generated movies, and you can't hardly tell them from the real thing. Matter of fact, if you were paying attention, they showed you an artificial intelligence generated movie the other day when they said those people came back from the space station and landed in the ocean. That was not, I'm not trying to tell you they weren't in the space station. I'm not trying to tell you anything. But that video of them landing was AI generated, and it's been proven over and over and over. So if they did come back and they landed in the Gulf of America, why did they have to generate the video from AI? Anyway, just something to think about. But this is something that I studied years ago, sort of with my oldest son. He sent me the first picture of it. He was the first one to ever tell me about it. But for hundreds and hundreds of years, they've had these great big heads, carved heads in Peru. And I want to show you some pictures. And they're just everywhere. And they're giant, big old heads, right? But just a few years ago, they discovered through this ground-penetrating device that they've used. Now the one they're using in Giza is way more further along. But look what they did here. You may not have seen this. They found out they weren't just heads on the ground. They were heads on bodies. And nobody ever knew that. I mean, nobody. Look at the next picture. They weren't just heads sticking out of the ground. They were heads on bodies. And they're giant bodies. Look at my next. These just go down, down. Do I have another picture? Yeah, here's another one. They're excavating or whatever. That's it. Okay, so I just wanted to show that to say you can't believe what you see, and surely not today. And if you're in Sunday school, and if you're not, you need to ask yourself, why ain't I in Sunday school? But if you're in Sunday school, we're in that section in Luke, which is sort of like Matthew 24. I told my class, and I'll tell you guys, the vast majority of Bible teachers, they don't catch it. But Matthew 24 is called the Olivet Discord. The Olivet was a little Mount Olives. Now, we're going to ask our resident expert, Diana. Mount Olive, how big is it? Is it like, it's not like a rocky mountain, though. It's like a mound, isn't it? Or what we would call a big hill or something. And it seemed to be a place where Jesus liked to go. And Jesus would take a certain group of men. Jesus had 2 elite groups out of the 12. He had Peter, James, and John. You see a lot of times he'd take Peter, James, and John. When he went to Gethsemane the night before he was arrested, he took Peter, James, and John. Another group of elite selected disciples were Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, Peter's brother. So James and John were brothers, and Peter and Andrew were brothers. And in Matthew 24, it's called the Olivet Discord. It's also in Mark 13, which is probably Peter's rendition. But that was in the middle of the night on Mount Olives. That's why it's called the Olivet Discord. And so after they're sitting up there in the middle of the night, and he takes those 4 men by themselves, and they ask him 3 questions. Now, Luke 21 sounds like the same verbiage, but it's not. It wasn't the same occurrence, because Luke 21 is in the middle of the day, and Luke 21 is at the temple in front of the crowds of people. So what I think is possibly the night before, they were on Mount Olives with Jesus. And he gave them the Olivet Discourse about the end times and about their immediate history that would come. But Matthew 24 speaks about the time right before Jesus comes as well. And then I think possibly the next day when they were at the temple and he was teaching, which was probably 1 day before or 2 days before the cross, I think they said to him, you need to teach this to the masses. Because in Luke 21, he just starts teaching about the same thing, sort of. But in Luke 21, it focuses on the Jewish history that would come 38 years later, which was 70 A.D. in the destruction of Jerusalem. So they're 2 different things. But I said all that to say this. In Matthew 24, he warns the people right before he comes 4 different times, don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. So it must be a very deceptive time period. Would you agree? So I found this little video that I think is real informative, but it's really short. So it's only like 6 minutes, 7 minutes, something. But if you haven't seen it, I think it'll be enlightening to you. So let's watch it.
This is a bit different than the typical content you might be used to coming from this channel, but as it grows, I want to stay on top of the latest research and newest developments coming out about our ancient past as it's released. And just this week, in March of 2025, there appears to be breaking news coming out of Egyptian research surrounding the pyramids of Giza, with new developments to be released in the upcoming weeks as well. And it could be groundbreaking, so it's worth it to me at least to stay on top of this as news is potentially released. Essentially, what's been found is a chamber inside the middle pyramid of Khafre on the Giza Plateau. And that chamber supposedly has 5 previously unknown structures that eerily resemble the Djed Pillar, which can also be found in the Great Pyramid of Giza. But beyond that, there's been structures that have been found underneath this pyramid. Structures going almost 2 kilometers deep underground. First, a little backstory. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project discovered a void inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, or Khufu's pyramid, and it took the world by storm. And this was accomplished by using muon sensing technology. Now, muons are these particles that are always falling from space, and using muon detectors, scientists can count how many muons are passing through the space inside structures, and therefore it was able to be 3D mapped. Well, in 2022, Filippo Biondi and Corrado Malagna published a peer-reviewed paper using SAR technology to scan the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, SAR, or synthetic aperture radar, uses radio waves to send signals down to the Earth and measures the pulses coming back as echoes, and therefore they're able to map the surrounding area where they sent out these radio waves. From what I know of SAR imaging, it is unable to penetrate through the ground, but their research team apparently added enhancements to this technology where they were able to measure micro movements in the background seismic activity, and therefore were able to create these 3D maps of both above ground and subsurface structures. The paper itself clearly indicates that the results are experimental, and there is some controversy surrounding their findings in this 2022 publication, mainly because while many of the structures within the pyramid itself appear to have been mapped out, many were also not, and so some question the reliability of this methodology. On the other hand, many believe that because some of the structures were able to be mapped out, that it does indicate a viable approach using these technologically enhanced methods. The Land of Chem channel recently released a video, and I think he did a great job analyzing these particular results. So I'll link that and the paper in the description below so you can have a look for yourself to see how these stack up. But the newest and possibly most impressive research they were able to accomplish was on the middle pyramid, or Khafre's pyramid. And this information was just released this week in March. They applied the same technological approach and were able to identify a previously unknown chamber, and what was found inside that chamber were 5 multi-layered structures with a triangular cap that appeared to look like a Djed pillar, the same type of structure you can see in the Great Pyramid itself and in Egyptian hieroglyphs. But beyond that, because of this advanced technological approach, they were able to map out some of the subsurface structures that lay underneath this pyramid. And what was under there is quite shocking. There appeared to be 8 cylindrical columns aligned in pairs with spirals snaking their way down these columns. And underneath those, they sit upon 2 cube-like structures that appear to be non-natural. And the structures themselves go as far down as almost 2 kilometers, which is just incredible. The images and research presented here are from an abstract that was sent out to the press in anticipation of a 4-hour conference that is set to take place this week in Italy, where the team is going to present their research. And following that presentation, there is a plan to release this information in multiple languages and to the wider public. Now, this news is already starting to make its way through various social media platforms, and the speculation has clearly begun. Some people are saying this is evidence of ancient lost high technology, indicating some sort of electromagnetic or energy functionality. Others are saying this is purely architectural, and the spirals going up and down those columns are staircases. There's others even saying this could be evidence of the fabled Hall of Records that is said to be somewhere underneath the plateau in Giza. I have my personal beliefs, but one thing is for sure, that this is bound to spark a lot of controversy between both the academic and alternative communities when it comes to our ancient past. Where I stand is that I think it's fascinating that there are still new discoveries happening with new research and new technological advancements, and I'm waiting to see what evidence they provide, because it is truly exciting. Now, there's a chance that this is just perhaps misinterpreted data, but it would appear from that 2022 publication that at least some of the structures were able to be mapped using this technology, and perhaps even further enhancements were made to the technology itself when approaching this subsequent project. The only thing I know for sure is that we don't know everything. And so as time moves forward and things develop, it's important for me to stay on top of the latest findings that are coming out. I think it's important for all of you to have it when it comes out so you can make your own decisions for yourself. In the description below, I will link the media management team that is putting out this research team's information. I appreciate you watching. This is a bit different than the content you're used to. And I have a ton of adventure videos that I'm currently editing to put out there, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and definitely leave any thoughts or comments about what you think this all means or what it could be. I'd love to hear every take that's out there.
Okay. Very interesting. Now, Miss Fox, she's going to hate me. Miss Fox, I got quite a while here to bloviate, so could you find a picture of the Washington Monument? Just any good picture that for sure shows the top of it. And let me know, and I'll just start to bloviate. Okay, so what is this? Nobody knows. So I thought, man, I know everything about these pyramids. I could talk on these pyramids for hours. And but I've forced myself not to do that. So I just started studying and praying and asking God to show me anything new. And I got down this road and that I'd never been down before. And I started reading in the Antiquities of Egypt, and I watched the head of that, several videos. Let me just give you this little tidbits that I learned that I didn't know. Now, the Sphinx is a mystery. It seems to have the body of a cat. And I don't know if you've ever been here for me to do the deal I do on the Antichrist, but he's tied to a cat. He's actually tied to a black cat. But it's got the head of a man. But it's been worked on. It may not have always had the head of a man, but it's got the head of a man on a cat's body. That's what we call a hybrid, right? I didn't know this, but Sphinx in ancient Egyptian means father of terror. Who's the first person you thought of when you heard father of terror? Yeah, sure, yeah. But, you're nerdy Christians. Maybe that's the problem. But I thought, I never heard that before. I didn't know that. I thought, that's interesting, right? The word Giza in the original Egyptian is pronounced Rashdal. That don't matter. I just threw that out there to sound like I was important. But what that means is the mouth of the caves, which I think is very interesting. There are tunnels going everywhere under the pyramids. One that they have mapped out, they have not excavated the whole thing, but they know it goes from Giza to Iraq. I didn't look that up, but that's hundreds of miles. Egyptian history says, now this is very interesting. And she's got my picture up there. What I'm wondering is, you see the very top of this obelisk? It's the Washington Monument. This is it's hard to teach this without, You'll notice there's a dome. The same thing's found in the Vatican. And wherever there is an obelisk, there's always a dome. In Egypt, there are obelisks everywhere. Well, the obelisk was the idol worship of the male organ. The domes are the place of the female deity, and the dome symbolized the womb of the female deity. We're almost to the time period where most Christians celebrate Easter. That's the female deity, okay? But this is Washington Monument, and that's what that is. They're thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. I've taught on this before. The number 666 is all over this thing. Okay? There's no denying it. That's what they stood for thousands of years. So you need to ask yourself, why does Washington, D.C. have an obelisk at Washington, D.C.? There's always a pool of water, and there's always a dome at the end of the pool of water. So all of these are symbolisms that pagans worship. Now, we don't call ourselves pagans. We're Baptists or we're Christian, whatever. And we, not us, but we Christians in America are the dumbest people that have ever followed Jesus Christ. When you have a man, Jesse Duplantis, who brags about having the largest house in Louisiana, tells his congregants the reason why Jesus hasn't came back is because you guys aren't giving enough. You got to be kidding me. Now, what I'm wondering is, you'll notice at the top of the Washington Monument, it's a pyramid. Just like the heads that was above the ground were just the heads to giant bodies that went way down in the earth, I wonder if the pyramids are just the capstone to God knows what beneath them. These penetrating things can only go so far, but they are sure that they have found things that aren't natural. And these cones are 2,100 feet tall. And it looks like they have copper wiring or some kind of cabling wrapped around them, which makes these people think it was some kind of a power source. I don't know. Or is it all deception? I don't know. I think that's very interesting. Watch this. Egyptian history says, written on hieroglyphics, they try to date it. Most of them's dated 4,500 years ago, let's say. But they're just guessing. They don't have, it's not stamped down in the corner, 4,500 years ago. But Egyptian history says these caves and tunnels and underground cities are watched over by a giant snake. I thought this was very interesting. Or serpent. His name in ancient Egypt is Elfanash. So the next time your husband acts up, you can say, Elfanash, get out of here. And if a person tries to enter into these caves or tunnels, or there's a place underneath the paw of the Sphinx called the secret chamber. Okay, so if you try to enter Elfanash, this serpent, giant snake, will make you go blind. But the history written says one day a man will come and the giant serpent Elfanash will only make him blind in one eye. Now, you Bible students, does the Bible have anybody coming up right before Jesus comes back that's got one eye? Yeah, sure, right? I just thought this was amazing. And get this. In the secret chamber, the serpent will give the secret to the secret chamber and will reveal the secret to the secret chamber to the one man. Now, call me crazy. I don't care. I've been called worse. Look at this verse. I'm not telling you this verse has anything to do with this. I just think it's odd. Look at Matthew 24, verse 23. I've always thought it was odd. I've got every kind of commentary you can think of. Nobody says a word about it. Watch this. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ. This is Jesus talking to the disciples. There's only 4 of them. He's talking about the end time. If they tell you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall rise false Christ. That means false anointed ones, which is the Gentile way of saying false messiahs. Remember, Barack Hussein Obama was on the front cover of Time magazine, the Messiah. Remember, they put him on multiple magazines and he had crown of thorns. Remember Barack Obama? Well, they claimed he was the Messiah, the anointed one. Now, sometimes Christians that are in kindergarten, when they hear the Messiah, they only think of Jesus. That's a good way to get deceived. Anybody who claimed to be an anointed one is a Messiah. The Jews had two Messiahs, a military Messiah and a servant Messiah. And they just didn't know that it was talking about the same Messiah. So Caesar was called the Christ, or anointed one. But that wasn't Jesus. And Jewish people have been looking for their Messiah for thousands of years. And they're still looking for him. And most of them today think that he's buried in New York City. We'll get to that in a minute. For there shall rise false messiahs. Well, that's what they call Donald Trump. Now, don't get mad at me, throw hymnals. I didn't say anything about Donald Trump. I just said that's what people call him. Matter of fact, that's what the rabbis in Israel are claiming over and over and over. He's our Messiah. I'm just saying. They shall arise false messiahs and false prophets. Well, we've seen them, haven't we? And shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Now, that, in my opinion, Jesus is talking to 4 Jews. He's talking about the very elect is the Jewish people. Most Christians in America, especially today, will tell you, that's the Christians. We're the very elect. No, we're the dumbest people that followed Jesus yet. That's not talking about the church. I don't believe the church will be here to be deceived by the Antichrist. I've had discussions, let's call them, with people that believe in the pre-tribulation rapture, will argue that that's talking about the church. And then when you finally ask them, well, I didn't think he was going to be here. Then they just go and say, you're stupid. Come on. He ain't talking about the church. He's talking about the nation of Israel is going to be deceived and accept this false Messiah. We call him Antichrist. The Muslims call him Mahdi. And the Jews call him Messiah. And they will be deceived, and they will receive him as their Messiah. But he turns on them. Anyway, you got to put the whole book together, man. Behold, I've told you before. Watch it. Wherefore? If they say unto you, behold, he's in the desert. Now, when I see desert, I think of Egypt. Or I think of Saudi Arabia. I don't really think of, well, not in this setting. I don't think of Las Vegas. But I don't really think of Israel. And I think it's really strange because most of the time, the same word for desert can be wilderness. But like when Jesus was taken on his testing, or what they call the temptations of Christ, it says that the Holy Spirit took him out into the wilderness. Now, but when you, in the Bible, when you predominantly think about the desert, that's usually Egypt. Now, watch this. Here's where it gets strange. Go not forth. So if they tell you that the Messiah is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, if they tell you this, he's in the secret chambers. Believe it not. Now, I swear to you, you don't do it now because it's rude to be looking on, texting people and stuff on your phone when I'm preaching. But if you Google that, what does the secret chambers mean in the Bible? It'll tell you it means your prayer closet. Notice it doesn't say the secret place. The Bible talks about the secret place. It says chambers. Don't you think it's odd that there's a secret chamber underneath the paw of the Sphinx? Like I said, I'm not trying to tell you it means anything. I just think it's strange verbiage. Why would Jesus say, hey, don't believe them? It's going to be a very deceitful time if they say the Christ, the Messiah, is in the desert. That doesn't really, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Why would the Messiah be in the desert or coming from the desert? Would that be where you'd think the Messiah would come from? Wouldn't you think it would be more believable if he says, don't believe him if he's in the temple and he says that he's the Messiah? Or don't believe him if he's the military leader of the whole world and he says he's the Messiah. But he somehow, through the Holy Spirit, is guiding you to the desert is where the deception will come. I don't know what that means. And then he goes on to double it and says, or if they say he's in the secret chamber. And now here we have all this stuff coming out. I don't know. It's just weird, I think. So, one more thing before we get to chapter 41. In the news also yesterday was the Senate confirmation of Trump's pick for the ambassador to Israel. And it's very important. And Donald Trump's pick for the ambassador to Israel is none other than the Southern Baptist pastor, TV host, Mike Huckabee. Everybody know Mike Huckabee? Nobody cares. This is very interesting, at least it is to me. Diana, how many times do you think Perry Stone's been to Israel? Well, probably at least twice for 30 years or something, right? Mike Huckabee says he's been to Israel over 100 times. The governor of Arkansas? Anyway, look at this article. I just think it's odd. Huckabee visits Lubavitcher rabbi's grave of head of Israel posting. Now, I want you to remember, this is Rabbi Shearsnitz or something like that. Shearnick or something like that. It's hard to say his name. But he's the Lubavitcher's Messiah. And they believe he's coming back. And he's buried in a place in New York City under glass. And all of these politicians, mainly Christian politicians, are making pilgrimage to his grave and praying to him to help them win elections. So in 2016, it was on the news everywhere. Ivanka Trump and her husband, Jared Kushner, went there before the 2016 election to pray to this rabbi to give Donald Trump the election. And when Donald Trump won, they attributed it to the answered prayers from the dead rabbi on their behalf. Donald Trump went there too and prayed. Then when he ran for the second time, they all go back and they all prayed, but their prayers didn't come true. This time they did it again, and he answered their prayers once again. Now, imagine this. Ivanka Trump has dropped her Christian beliefs and has became a Jew. And her husband, Jared Kushner, is a big-time Jew, been raised there, his whole family, right? But why is Donald Trump, Presbyterian, going and praying at the grave of a dead rabbi? Now, you need to look into what Lubavitchers believe, and primarily what they believe about you. You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, so now, previous governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee goes there the day before and prays that his Senate confirmation hearing would go his way. Now, let's read this a little bit. The former Arkansas governor, a staunch supporter of Israel, visited the site in Queens together with his wife, Janet. Now, here he is with these Jewish rabbis. Now, let me remind you, they don't believe in Jesus Christ. They don't believe in Gentiles. They don't believe Gentiles go to heaven. They believe Gentiles are less than animals, less than a dog. They believe hell was created by God to put Gentiles in there to keep the fire burning. You're kindling. They also teach and believe that Jesus Christ is boiling in a pot of human excrement, and you're going to be the kindling to keep the fire going. Now, go back up to this picture. Look, he looks like he's right at home to me. I wouldn't, if there was a bunch of them across the street, I wouldn't walk across the street. Let's maybe to tell them to get out of here. Let's keep reading. March 24th, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee visited the grave of the late Lubavitcher Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson in New York on Sunday. You can go on YouTube and listen to this guy tell you what they believe. It's on there. They don't take it off. They take us off if you say the word, that starts with a V. They gave us strikes and took us off if we said the word Joe Biden. But they don't take his videos off. He's dead now, of course. Now, watch what it says. Just days before the confirmation hearing, actually the day before, for his appointment to U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, a staunch supporter of Israel, visited the site in Queens together with his wife Janet. The Huckabees were escorted by Dr. Joseph Frager and his wife Karen and Rabbi David Katz of the New York-based Israel Heritage Foundation, who also hosted the Huckabees for a reception after the visit. Now, why, if you believe this man was worse than a dog, why would you host him to a dinner? Yesterday was Rocky's birthday. We hope to get to take him to dinner. Peggy told me Deanne's birthday's coming up. We hope to take you to dinner because we love you. We want to celebrate you. But if I thought you was created for kindling in hell, I wouldn't want to pay for your dinner unless, of course, I was deceiving you and I was getting something from you in the tunes of billions and billions of dollars. So U.S. Senate hearing of Huckabee's nomination for U.S. convoy to Israel is scheduled to take place on Tuesday on Capitol Hill. The 69-year-old conservative evangelical pastor, Southern Baptist, TV host, and two-time Republican presidential candidate has visited the Holy Land scores of times and led thousands of participants on solidarity tours over the past half century since his first trip to Israel right out of high school just before the 1973 Yom Kippur War. A longtime champion of Israel's cause, he has been a staunch supporter of Israel's rights to the biblical heartland in Judea and Samaria, the relocation of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, and has worked to fight the BDS movement. The grave of the late Lubavitcher rabbi has become a popular spiritual and political pilgrimage site. It's a pilgrimage site. Last year, U.S. President Donald Trump visited the site during the last month of his presidential campaign on the one-year anniversary of the October 7, 2023 Hamas-led massacre in southern Israel. Now, we're not standing up for Hamas. We think Hamas is terrible. But I read yesterday over 50,000 people have been killed in the war in that little bitty area called Gaza. Over 20,000 of them were children. And they estimate at least that many, 50,000, still in the rubble. Now, I don't know what side you're on. Also, yesterday I read there are scores of thousands of people that's been killed in Syria since we put the new director into Syria. Over 7,000 of them Christians. Now, you know, you might have believed the lie. Bashar Assad was a monster. Bashar Assad was the greatest proponent of Christianity in the whole Middle East. Bashar Assad married a Catholic woman. Bashar Assad's children are being raised Catholic. Now, you know me, I'm not standing up for the Catholics, but there were churches in Syria that had not closed their doors since the Apostle Paul. Remember when the Apostle Paul, his name was Saul, and he was going to a place to arrest Christians. And do you remember the name of the place? Damascus, Syria. There was a big population of Christians that the disciples had led to Jesus, and Jews that had been in Jerusalem went back to their town. They'd come for the feast, and then they'd go back to their town, and they spread Jesus. And it was a great movement in Damascus, Syria. And Paul said, I got to go arrest them and bring them back and kill them. These churches, you know, this church has had times when, you know, my little friend Patty Reese used to tell me, she said, it got down to me and two old women one time. And we'd come up here and we'd clean the church and we'd have our lunch and we'd talk about what are we going to do? Sell the building? Give it to the Baptist orphanage? What do we do? And then God brought it back. But these churches have been there for thousands of years. They're destroyed. Those Christian people, they probably didn't look like you and me, you know. But they were Christian people. Dead. Anyway, back to Huckabee. So Huckabee, also the Argentina president, Javier Milei or something, who studied with a rabbi who is later appointed as his ambassador to Israel, has also visited the site several times since his election. I just think that's odd. Did you know the president of Mexico was elected last year, and it's a woman, and she's a Jew? And there were 34 different candidates assassinated before she got elected. Now, when I heard that, I thought, that's bull. Google it. How many, okay, if you're in Mexico, are you going to run against her next time? 34 men. That's quite an election. So, my next article. What did old Huckabee say? He told them, man. Huckabee told them in the Congress, he said, we are people of the book. At Senate hearing, Mike Huckabee defends Christian Zionist beliefs and support for Israel. Well, let's just see if old Huckabee is a person of the book. Now, Ivanka Trump, that's not her real name. Her real name's Ivana, but Ivanka somehow is a nickname for her. She goes regularly to pray to this dead rabbi who's supposedly coming back. Her Jewish name she was given, or she selected, is Yael. Y-A-E-L. And her husband, Jared Kushner. So, all of these people go. It's like the article said, it's a pilgrimage. So, let's look what the book says, Governor Huckabee. Deuteronomy 18, verse 9. Here's what the book says. When thou art come into the land, God talking to the children of Israel who brought out of Egypt. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. So whatever it is he tells you to do is an abomination. Okay? That's the worst sin it can be. Okay? There's a sin. There's a sin of omission. There's a sin of commission. There's a sin unto death. And then there's abominations. There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits. Someone who talks to evil spirits. Or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with the Lord thy God. For these nations which thou shalt possess, hearken unto observers of times and unto diviners. But as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not suffered thee to do so. So necromancy is anyone that talks to the dead, much less prays to the dead. And the Southern Baptists are backing Huckabee all the way and kicked me out. I don't pray to dead people. That's an abomination. And he's the one that said he's a people of the book. The book says what he's doing is an abomination. So I'm asking, what book? The Talmud? I looked up necromancer for you. This is the Strong's definition. To frequent a place to consult, seek or require or inquire, or to talk or pray to the dead. Now you tell me, why is a Southern Baptist pastor going to a dead rabbi and asking him to help him get confirmed as an ambassador to Israel? Now, one thing for you to know is there's a difference in Israel and Zionism. So we support Israel. I just talked about me. I support Israel. Israel is the apple of God's eye. God's not done with Israel. Read Romans 9, 10, 11. But I do not support Zionism. It's evil. So we're in Genesis 41:1. Here, real quick. Look at this verse. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. Now, if you go on down in the chapter, you'll see that when Pharaoh calls up Joseph from prison, he's 30 years old. And if you go back to Genesis 37, it tells you that when his brother sold him, he was 17. So from the time he got sold into slavery until the time he was called to Pharaoh to interpret the dream is 13 years. Sunday night I did a little exercise with you guys, and I asked if any one of you would volunteer to be incarcerated for 5 years to save Linda Hoopendiddle. And nobody raised their hand. But this poor guy was in prison for 13 years. But God had a plan to save the whole known world. The question is, what are you willing to allow God to do with your life that might have eternal ramifications for someone else? So look at verse 2. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. So these are really fat cows, really good-looking, healthy cows. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, starving to death cows. And they stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed cows did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke, and he slept and dreamed the second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. Rank means good. If you ever go to a rodeo, they'll say, that's some rank stock. That means good stock. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind sprang up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. That's his Egyptian way of saying, oh man, I forgot. Yeah, he forgot for 2 years. Pharaoh was wroth with his servant and put me in prison in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. Remember? and we dreamed a dream in one night. I and he, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream, he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was, me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. Remember Cecil B. DeMille's? He picked what was his name to play Pharaoh? Telly Savalas. Yul Brynner. I knew it was one of them skinheads. And that they were the royalty because of the such prominent lice problem They didn't have a hair on their body. They shaved every hair off their body. That's why one of the plagues was lice. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst interpret a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of a river. And behold, there came out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored, and lean flesh, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the lean and the ill-favored kind did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored. You couldn't even tell they had eaten as at the beginning, so I awoke. I just want to say this and I'll be done. Kings don't sleep well. Sometimes you want to be important or the king or whatever. Kings don't sleep well. Now there's several more cases. This is just a few I picked out of my top of my head. Look at Esther 6:1. This king don't sleep well. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. Well, look at Daniel 2:1. And in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Kings don't sleep well. Look at Daniel 6:18. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. There's something wrong when you can't sleep. Now, let's finish this up. Genesis 41, verse 22. Just a few more scriptures. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this unto the magicians, and they were none of them that could declare it to me. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. And 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one dream. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showed unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall rise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. That's what we call a tax. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Now, I want to end it with this. I told you Ivanka is a nickname for her real name, Ivana. And when she converted to Hebrew or Jewish, she took the name Yael. I think it's strange. Her name is after a woman in the Old Testament. Now look at this article and we'll be done. Did you know that Ivanka Trump's real name isn't Ivanka? Yeah, we know that. Watch what this says. Ivanka Trump angered many earlier this year when she was named as a officer advisor to her father, the president. But many may not know that Ivanka is not her name at all. The first daughter's legal name is Ivana Marie Trump. She was named after her mother, Ivana. Ivanka is a nickname, much like Bobby is a nickname for Robert, which never made any sense to me. Here are some more fun facts about names in Trump's family. Now, Trump's Hebrew name is Yael. In the book of Judges, a woman named Yael came upon the enemy king Sisera, who had fled from battle with the Israelites. She fed and sheltered him until he fell asleep. Then she killed him by using a mallet to drive a tent peg into his skull. Would you take that name? It reminds me of that poem that Trump used to recite, you knew I was a snake when you let me in. All the names in the Bible at your disposal. You could pick Sarah. You could pick Esther. You could pick all these names. No, I want the woman that tricked a guy, fed him when he was asleep and drove a tent spike through his skull. I don't know. I just think that's strange. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for these people. Thank you for the Word of God that we have that is true. Thank you for Jesus Christ who's paid the price for us. God, help us to stay steadfast in your Word. What we believe is your Word. In the words of the illustrious Pastor Mike Huckabee, we are people of the book. Help us to stay to the book. No matter what they find in Egypt, who cares? No matter what Israel does, who cares? Where is our relationship with you? Help us to be mindful of you, that we might take up our cross daily and follow you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. It's my new shirt. My new shirt.